Trigger warnings. Mentions of molestation and sexual harassment by a family member. Peter wakes up again. This time he wakes up as Nina, a woman who lives in the same building as Peter, right next door to Dexter's apartment. For the longest moment, he is aware of the moment that happened between his uncle and himself in the hospital room and cannot help but wonder if he's finally died. There's no way, after all, that he's still alive. But when he wakes up as Nina, he decides that he's going to live his life the way he wants and hopes for until the inevitable happens and he finds himself with his uncle again. For all he knows, when he returns to his own body, he might still be with his uncle, with Englund trying his best to kill him. But he has yet to come to the realization that Nina shares a similar past to him, a past that he will have to confront finally, both through Nina and himself, because the storm's coming in a way that Peter is certainly not at all ready to face. With the hope that he will do whatever the hell he wants this time around, even if through someone else's body, I try to imagine his surprise when he suddenly feels a spike of nervousness and anxiety the moment he steps onto the bus. Now, Peter can attribute these particular feelings to a couple of things: social anxiety, stress, or a simple unwillingness to deal with a crowd after such a long time at the office. But no, that is not correct. As realization slowly dawns upon Peter, I will explain my side of understanding of Nina's past and current situation. So you see, there's a simple explanation why Peter, his consciousness now in Nina, felt that intense spark of anxiety and nervousness when he suddenly woke up as Nina. Nina was, similarly to him, assaulted by someone, her father's best friend. And although Peter again feels weird trapped in a woman's body, it takes him less time to adjust to her feelings, fears, and consciousness than it took with the others. So when Nina walks out of the bus, it is Peter's consciousness that encourages her to wrap her body better in the coat that hangs over her thin frame. Weirdly, this simple move makes both of them feel safe. When Nina steps into her home, it's her husband Steve who greets her with a kiss on her cheek. Peter's consciousness recoils for the slightest moment, something so subtle that it goes unnoticed by both Nina and her husband. Surely if Peter's trying to behave differently from Nina, then there's a good chance he is gaining more and more power over these people with every transition. "How was work?" Steve asks her and starts setting up the dining table. "I cooked early today." At this, Peter immediately relaxes. Now this is a familiar territory. He can deal with this, so as Nina follows after her husband, it is Peter who really takes notice of Steve, catching every handsome feature on his face, or the kind gestures that would otherwise go unnoticed by a stranger. It helps that he's in the body of someone who loves Steve. "I hope you don't mind eating a little early," Steve adds. Nina shakes her head at that. "No, that's wonderful. I will change." Steve agrees. "I've put some hot water on for you." "Thanks," she calls after him and swiftly steps into the bathroom. Not just water, Steve also put aside the clothes that she prefers to wear during night. Despite the harsh weather outside and the worries lacing her features every now and then, Nina feels happy and loved. She quickly freshens up and changes into her more comfortable clothes. Steve is Nina's husband, as I mentioned earlier. The both of them met during their college years, and this particular meeting served as a lifesaver for Nina, who, by the time she turned 20, was struggling to come to terms with her father's best friend's physical abuse. When their college ended and they started looking for jobs, Steve proposed to her that she could always come and share a flat with him. And although she was still worried about being alone with a man, she realized anything was better than living in the same home as her ignorant parents and the often visiting best friend of her father. Besides, she had fallen in love with Steve by that time, so they started living together, and Nina's parents every so often visited her. Nina living with Steve gave her an excuse to create some distance between the man and herself. She no longer had to see or meet him, and things seemed like they would return to normal. Several years passed, and then Steve proposed to her for marriage. She said yes, and they married the same year. It's been a year since their marriage, and they haven't had any sexual encounters, a fact that both worries Nina and relaxes her. She would like to avoid it as much as possible for as long as possible, until the dam breaks. That is one feeling that Peter and Nina share, at least. "What happened?" Steve asks and puts more food on the plate. "Eat, please." "Thanks," she replies. "And what are you talking about? I'm fine." Okay, I can see the cogs turning in Peter's head at the gestures. The feelings he easily managed and controlled with the previous transitions are kind of coming out this time. Is it because Steve is a better partner than both Luke and Dylan? or the shared past that Peter is not yet sure of is making it so easy for him to feel his own feelings and understanding of what real romance really feels like. Steve looks at Nina for a while in silence, and just when he looks like he is about to say something, he stops and then nods at her. "All right, if you say so. Would you like some red wine?" Nina laughs. "Seriously, are you trying to get me drunk?" Steve wriggles his eyebrows at her. "Am I that obvious?" She laughs and hits him on his arm before asking him for some red wine. The reason that Nina was panicking so much lately is obviously related to her dad's best friend, a man that Peter is soon going to get accustomed with again. Her parents had just informed her of the update on her case against the man, and obviously with the news have come all memories flooding in. It's not easy to get out of after all, especially not when her husband has absolutely no idea about it. It is no longer about handling the past on herself, but keeping it away from Steve for as long as possible, in fear that he may feel disgusted or worse. She loves Steve after all. She is allowed to be selfish. In a bid to deal with the fresh stress at hand, she decides to visit her parents again. Since they have been supportive in her fight for justice, it makes sense she feels the safest with them, after Steve. But before meeting them, she meets Dexter coming out of his home to throw out some trash. Again, Peter's consciousness is much more aware of Dexter's presence than ever before. So, when Nina and Dexter engage in a conversation, it is Peter's consciousness that hopes to hear his own name coming out of Dexter's mouth. It doesn't help that Peter knows Dexter is almost always present in the hospital room with him. If there's anything he wants to know the most, it's probably why he does that. Thankfully, he doesn't have to wait long for that. And although what he finds is not at all close to what he wants to hear, it is something. Peter can deal with it for a while. "Hello, Dexter. How's your lovely shop?" Nina asks. Dexter shifts on his feet. "It's all right. I've got to pay it a little more attention now. Haven't paid it any mind in a while. I'll be there throughout the day. Do you need some flowers for Steve?" Nina shakes her head at him. "Thank you for the generous offer. Is it because of Peter? I mean, you are spending a lot of time out of the shop." Dexter rubs his free hand over the stubble on his face, looking nervous. Peter ironically, unconsciously feels the same in his consciousness. "Yeah." "How is he?" she asks. Dexter shrugs. "Cannot tell for sure. Doctors say he's recovering well and that he should be alright in a month or so, but they aren't very sure either." Nina pats her shoulder. "He'll be alright, Dexter. Have some faith." Dexter smiles at her. "That's what's keeping me sane, Nina." After the mysterious little conversation between the two, Nina returns to her mom's place. Peter's consciousness all the while tries to understand the conversation between both his neighbors, and the implications of why Dexter keeps coming back to him. Surely there's more than simple emotions at play here. Dexter is his neighbor, but so is Nina, or Aunt Casey, so why don't they come and visit him as often as Dexter does? Like always, actually, since Nina informed her mom of the abuse, she cries at the first sight of her. "Oh, I don't know how I did not see the signs." "It's all right, Mama," Nina replies and brings her in. "It's not your fault." "You are just a child," her mother tells her. "Oh, I am going to kill him." In the evening, and just before Nina has to leave her parents' home, her mother asks if she has informed Steve. "You know he deserves to know about this, Nina. You cannot keep hiding this from him now that you're married." Even though Peter understands her point, he cannot push Nina to risk saying something that she doesn't even believe in. So, he holds that thought and thinks about Steve and his charming self. "I cannot take the risk," she replies. "Risk for what?" "Risk of losing him, Mama," Nina tells her. "What if he gets disgusted?" "But he loves you, Nina. You have to have a little faith in his love for you." Nina shakes her head at her mom. "He's still a human. We all hate the ugly." When she returns home, Steve once again greets her with a kiss on her cheek, never on the lips. This is a fact that Peter has come to notice, and something that surely makes him think that Steve would have been a really good boyfriend for him. As for the kiss on the cheek, Nina and Steve do not really engage in physical intimacy a lot. Not after several months ago when Nina freaked out at the first sign of intimacy between them. A little less than a year ago, and soon after their marriage, the couple went on a honeymoon after long but stressful months at their respective jobs. Everything passed on nicely, but when came to the time for the deed, Nina freaked out so much that Steve immediately pulled away. They slept on the same bed that day, but there was a thick pillow wedged between them. The next morning, Steve tried to ask her about it, but with her wounds still being as fresh as they were, Nina refused to give any explanation. After that, Steve never brought back that conversation. Both of them settled on a pattern that Nina had set and Steve assumed to be a sensitive topic. Ever since that day, Steve hasn't made a single intimate move towards her. The most intimacy they shared are hugs or cuddles, or little kisses on the cheeks. For the most part, Nina feels grateful for the understanding from Steve. Before their marriage, she had lied to him and told him that she was a staunch religious person and there was no way she was going to engage in any sexual activity until her marriage. Steve had shown no issue with it, but then Nina continued it into almost a year of their marriage. And surely at this point, the thought must bugger her husband's mind. Oftentimes, when she has nothing to engage her mind with, she asks herself that very question. That doesn't mean she comes up with an answer, but that is not the goal, really. The goal is to actively ask questions, so she does. Peter has a similar situation, and there are several memories that I have come up with in relation to his own molestation situation. There are 2 such memories that I have come up with. So, we shall now take a little break from Nina and try to understand our very own Peter. Surely he had more than one reason that made him feel compelled to take his own life. I have come up with 2 in particular in relation to that one certain event. I believe we all know what that event is. The most recent one after the molestation happened to be with a stranger. Peter has no recollection of his name, and so nor do I. Peter has just returned from his office, has bid farewell to Luke for the weekend, and is sitting in his car. There are scars on his body, so we know that even if he doesn't know how he got them, he is aware that something has happened. He may have no recollection of the event itself for now, but he is aware. So, it's late at night and everything around him is quiet. It is then that a knock comes at his car window and a man waves at him from the other side. "Hey man," the stranger is saying, "drive me to such and such place." Peter can lower the window and ask him better what he wants, but he doesn't. A fear grips his heart. He stares at the man for the longest minute. "Hey man," the stranger shouts at him, slapping his hand on the window over and over. "Will you open the fucking door for me, mate?" And just like that, Peter knows it's dangerous. He drives away at such a fast speed that he is sure he is going to end up in a similar position like James, but nothing like that happens because he considers himself unlucky. And when his car finally comes to a screeching halt in the dead of the night, it sounds menacing to one's ears. "Oh fuck," he mutters to himself, and suddenly he knows what exactly transpired approximately 2 weeks ago. He understands now why his uncle Englund kept on patting his shoulder telling him that it'll be alright and that he needs to get over James's death because he had been nothing but abusive towards him, all the while pouring him drink after drink. Until that point, Peter had considered both of them close to each other, so mourning James' death with his uncle was not out of the ordinary. It was normal, until it wasn't. At some point in the night, Peter must have lost consciousness, hence awareness about what was going on around him, for he doesn't remember anything from that night except the bruises he noticed and the pain he felt the next afternoon. He realizes that the very same night what actually happened and what his uncle did. The next memory is that with Dexter. In my opinion, it's very tame compared to the previous one. A few weeks after the first memory, Peter is home alone. Obviously, the reality of what happened has just started setting in, and Peter is hyper-aware more than he has ever been. So when one evening the doorbell rings, he takes a moment to contemplate if he should open the door. What if it's his uncle, he muses. When the doorbell rings another time, he gets into his trousers, grabs his baseball bat, and slowly walks towards the door. It isn't until he realizes it's Dexter that he slowly opens the door. "Hey," Dexter says softly. "How are you doing? Haven't seen you around in a while, or really, even on the balcony." Peter's impression of Dexter until now has been clear. He is no bullshit guy, keeps to himself most of the time, is handsome beyond comprehension, and shyer than Peter himself, so him coming to check on him is a sweet gesture. Peter discreetly puts down the baseball bat. "Hey," he replies. Dexter awkwardly shifts in the doorway. "I hope you're doing well. I brought you lemon cake. Homemade," he adds and shows him the cake. "Your mom's favorite," Peter notes absent-mindedly. Dexter gives him a brittle smile. "Yes, my mom's favorite. Can I come in?" Peter reddens at that and welcomes him in. "Sorry, sleep-deprived." "It's all right, really, I don't mind. Should I serve you some?" Peter replies and watches him place the plate on the kitchen counter. Peter follows after him and hands him 2 bowls and 2 spoons. "I've taken off from the company for some time, that's why you don't see me around so much." "Ah, that makes sense. Here," he adds, and hands Peter his plate. "I hope it's nice." "I am sure it is," Peter replies tiredly. 10 minutes later, Peter finds himself much more relaxed than he's been in a while, so much that when Dexter and he finally settle on the couch, he sits closer to Dexter than he has with any man in a while. Surely Dexter seems to notice this proximity, but when he doesn't move away, Peter takes it as a hint that it's probably because he's okay with it. And as their conversation progresses from the simple questions to a more private thing, Peter takes the first move and presses a kiss right on Dexter's lips. The world seems to quiet down around him, but Peter doesn't know that it's been quiet all this while anyway. Dexter, at first, doesn't do anything to move away from the touch, but before Peter can kiss him again, Dexter pulls back with a soft, confused laugh and gets up from the couch. Although the laugh isn't deriding, Peter cannot help but curl in on himself with shame. He should know better than to kiss someone without their permission after all. He doesn't even know if Dexter's gay. "I'm sorry, Dexter. I don't know what came over me, but..." Dexter takes a moment to answer. "It's all right, Peter. I understand." "You hate me now?" Dexter shakes his head immediately. "No, why would I hate you?" "Obviously because of the..." He stops and hints at the kiss that they shared. "I do not, Peter. That was surprising, that's all. A little unexpected, but it's okay." Peter nods and they return to a poor resemblance of the previous conversation they were having. Less than 15 minutes later, Dexter leaves Peter at home with a silly-sounding excuse, and Peter cannot help but wonder if he has lost the only good relation he has left in his life, besides the one he shares with his grandma, Sammie. However, just when he loses hope for that, sometime later, Dexter returns to him and drops sunflowers for him. So that must mean something, right? Nina, just like Peter himself, is in a much similar situation right now. For she's worried that if she doesn't initiate something intimate between Steve and herself, that she may as well be on the verge of losing him any day now. Because honestly, she tells herself, how long will he wait without any explanation given to him? In my opinion, however, Nina should have a little faith in Steve. When she returns to her home after meeting her mom, she finds Steve sleeping on the couch, the TV series playing on the TV now nothing more than a background noise. She changes and settles next to him. Steve wakes up soon after. "Hey," he says, "you're already here." "Yeah, my mom's gotta meet Aunt tomorrow. She had to pack." "That's good. Did you help?" Nina shrugs. "A little. She likes to do things her own way anyway." "All right. I'm sorry I didn't cook though. Had a headache." The worry doubles up in Nina's body at that. It is not just she who feels worried for Steve, but Peter as well. Nina rubs her hand over his forehead. "Is it better now? Do you want soup?" Steve shakes his head at her. "It's okay. I am much better now that you're here." He gives her a charming smile, and Nina cannot help but return her own. "We can order takeout, I guess." Nina nods at him. "We can do that." It's when he is busy ordering that Nina tries to make her first move. Obviously, she forgets to ask him first because she's sure he wouldn't refuse such intimate touch. However, the kiss never really happens. There are several reasons. It will take Nina a while to get comfortable with any intimate touch. The same goes for Peter, since he isn't comfortable with any intimate touch right now. Forget all the charm he felt for Steve. He still has his own issues to deal with. Anxiety doubles in Nina's mind, and so she isn't really able to make the first move at all, or any move at all. "What's the matter, Nina?" Steve asks her, very clearly detecting the discomfort and nervousness in Nina's behavior. "Nothing," she replies. "Just wanted to kiss you." "Are you sure you want to kiss me?" Nina knows she wants to. Despite the heavy load of her past still on her shoulders, if there's one thing she knows, it's that she would like to kiss Steve whenever possible, even if there's one part of her that doesn't. "I want to." "Then why are you so nervous?" he softly asks. "I am not," she lies. Steve carefully brings a finger and points at her wet eyelashes. "It's all right, Nina. We can talk if you want." "I'm worried only talking will not do me any good." "Oh, and why is that?" Steve asks. "I'm worried you'll lose interest in me." Steve shakes his head at her. "No, that will never happen. I love you. I have loved you for such a long time, and it's not going to end just like that." He pokes a finger on her nose. "For our lives and more, you're stuck with me, ma'am." She softly laughs at that, now more relieved. "Thanks, Steve." I love you, Nina. Nina and Peter both relax at the change of situation. I love you too. With as much support as she receives from Steve, it doesn't take her long to come to the realization that maybe, after all, Steve deserves to know about her past after such a long time. She cannot take the chance of keeping him in the dark any longer. Sure, Nina loves him, but she cannot keep him blind in fear that he'll leave once he gets to know about her past. The next day, she takes a day off from her work. Steve naturally is concerned for her. He asks her if she's doing okay, and she replies that they've got to talk about something important. Keeping in mind what happened yesterday, Steve seems to understand what the conversation could possibly be about. Okay, do you want to eat something first? In the next few hours, Nina explains her part of the story. Steve seems stunned, but not as upset or angry as she expected him to be. Instead, he holds her hand and looks sad and angry on her behalf. Thanks for telling me, he says. You did not owe me any explanation, but I am glad you opened up to me. I'm so sick of living in the past. I want to move on, but the past is still out, and I just can't stop thinking about it. It's all right, Nina, really. Let it go naturally. Then Nina informs him about the update on her case against her father's friend. I filed it some time ago, but they've been solving it slowly that only now have I received some update on him. I don't know what they'll do. That's still good, Steve replies. He has to go behind bars. Nina nods her head at him. If things go well, he will be finally locked in, Steve. Steve whispers his reply, and we will make sure that happens. Thank you, Steve, for making it this easy for me. Steve squeezes her hand and pulls her in for a hug. Thank you for trusting me. When is the hearing, he asks. Tomorrow. Much to Nina and Peter's surprise, Steve asks if he can see the guy. Not wanting to hide it anymore, Nina pulls up her phone, looks through the picture, and stops at a particular one. It's the man's driving license, but imagine Peter's surprise when he realizes that the man isn't anyone else but his uncle Englund. I have known that for a while now, having access to all of Nina's memories, but it must have come as news to Peter's consciousness. What the fuck? Nina mutters, looking at the picture with blurry eyes. How is this possible? Steve rightly looks confused. What happened? And Nina rightfully feels the same. I don't know. I don't know what's happening, Steve, but here he is. She gets up immediately after Steve grabs the phone and paces around the room. The anxiety and fear aren't hers. They belong to Peter. It's his uncle Englund, and Peter has to come to realize that he isn't the only victim of his uncle's inhuman behavior. Englund is Nina's dad's best friend, so this is the thing that binds Peter to Nina. A horrible way to connect, surely. Are you all right, Nina? Nina presses a hand on her forehead, not understanding the sudden spike of fear and anxiety in her. She's always felt scared and anxious around Englund, but never to this extent. Steve, I think I cannot breathe. Steve drops the phone on the couch and catches her before she falls unconscious. Now is the time when Peter will come to understand how it feels to stand right in front of one's abuser in court. It sucks that Englund is his abuser too, and that his own abuse hasn't really come to an end. To think that he's going to face Englund for someone else is a bizarre thought indeed. How many more people has Englund hurt? Is that what he was talking about earlier in Peter's room? Englund is a man of power in their little town. Not only is he popular among the churchgoers, he is also known for his benevolence and philanthropy, a fact that Peter knows plays into his side. So it is no wonder to him when he notices several familiar faces in the courtroom. These people, much to Nina's and Peter's chagrin, are here to support Englund despite knowing what he's accused of. And, as it turns out, many will give testimony in favor of Englund. When Nina stands in the witness box, it is Peter's fear that makes it nearly impossible for her to even look at Englund's direction. Nina scratches at the wood with her pointed nails, the only physical thing that denotes that her body isn't only dealing with only her feelings, because it's no longer about Nina. Peter's memories rush in of the night, now more vividly than ever, and he starts crying in the middle of the process. But it does not deter Englund or his supporters. At the end, the judge announces that since Englund has already served 7 months in prison previously over the same case, he will only be given a restraining order. The judge says that Englund isn't allowed anywhere near Nina, and that's it. He gets out that easily. There's an enraged uproar from her side, but nothing changes. Englund passes by her with a grin on his face, and Nina and Peter watch him leave with utter helplessness. But obviously, it's no longer only her consciousness at the edge, but Peter's also. He's stuck dealing with his own past. If Nina's case couldn't incriminate Englund, what are the chances that Peter's will? And when a few days later Nina and Steve finally decide to take the first step towards intimacy, it's not the power of the sachet that brings back Peter, but himself. But just as he lets out the first gasp, a sign that he is returning to his body, he feels a hand on his head and he returns to sleep once again. The other side is, I admit, a little messy. It makes sense why Sammie does not want Peter to wake up now. After Englund attempted to do what he attempted, believing that he wouldn't be caught, the CCTV cameras caught him coming in and out of Peter's room late in the night. Immediately, he was arrested and brought in by the police. He is still being questioned about his presence in Peter's room at such a late hour. So when Sammie puts Peter back to sleep, an act that further alienates him from harming his uncle back, I cannot help but wonder why. I have an assumption. Sammie, just like anyone else, is not really aware of the situation. She doesn't know what transpired between Englund and Peter, and so she does not want to put him through misery when he can avoid it. Besides, there's a very good chance that she is aware of the charges against Englund. So, can we assume that she is assuming the same happened between Peter and Englund? Behind her, Dexter stands in silence, looking grave. His demeanor from earlier, especially when he met Nina just a few days ago, has vastly changed, no doubt from the knowledge of what might have happened. Essentially, he cares for Peter. A lot, a fact that Peter is sure to come to accept soon. Suddenly, Dexter's almost constant presence next to Peter makes sense. Why did that happen? Dexter asked Sammie. By now, the doctors have left them alone and Sammie and Dexter are the only two left next to Peter. I am not sure, Dexter. She is nervous and runs her hands up and down her arms. She must be conflicted. And is he going to get out if Peter doesn't wake up? Dexter asks. I do not think so. We have CCTV recording. I am sure that's enough to incarcerate him, or should be. But why did he do that? Dexter asks. Sammie looks occupied with various thoughts at that. I don't really know, Dexter. If there's really something going on here, then only Englund or Peter can tell us. Peter needs to be awake for that, Dexter comments. That's not in our hands, Dexter, Sammie lies. I want to give him a reason to wake up stronger, to face what's to come, she thinks to herself. Oh, have I ever said that I can hear thoughts? Never? Well, I can. She turns to Peter and softly runs her hand over his face again. She checks for the sachet and finds it pulled slightly from under Peter's pillow. Clearly someone had probably found it. Sammie isn't sure who it is. She securely puts it back under Peter's pillow and then pats his cheek again. Just one more time, Peter, she whispers to him. You'll know what you're looking for after that. You'll have found it. Dexter rolls his hand behind his back, looking nervous. Do you think Peter's cold? Why do you think that? Dexter shrugs. Because it's winter. He will not even be able to tell us if he is. Okay, that's something nice to be concerned about, but I'd rather you go home now before it starts snowing. You know that'll be bad. What about you? Dexter asks. Sammie turns to him. Don't worry about me, I'll stay with him this time. Dexter looks confused but nods his head anyway. He seems hesitant to leave at first, but when Sammie raises her eyebrow at him, he flushes red in shame and slowly steps out of the room. One step at a time, I am sure, if Peter had seen such a sight, he would have not felt guilty about the kiss he once left on Dexter's mouth all those months ago. Take care, Sammie. You take care, Dexter. That was an interesting thing to say. Until now, for several days, Sammie and Dexter have bid each other farewell in a similar manner, an activity that started in the second week of Peter's accident. In fact, Sammie's kind gestures towards Dexter, and often, then not sweet, teasing, talk with him have come naturally. Months ago, and soon after the kiss between Peter and Dexter, Peter had informed Sammie of what he had done. Clearly, she is aware of Peter's suppressed feelings for Dexter, and with Dexter behaving the way he is, there's a good chance that Sammie has an inclination, or at least an idea, if Dexter reciprocates Peter's feelings. But Sammie's recent behavior towards Dexter has been interesting, so sue me for following Dexter around this time. After all, I've got to make sure I haven't missed anything. Dexter drives to a fast food chain first, then drives back to the hospital to hand Sammie her portion of food, then drives back to his own home. For one whole minute, he stands in front of Peter's door, as if waiting for him to open the door from the other side, even though he knows that's impossible. That makes one wonder why he didn't want to be kissed by Peter all those months ago. Maybe, just maybe, had he welcomed the touch, he could have saved Peter. But then again, I cannot put the burden on his shoulders alone. Dexter had been grieving the death of his mother too. When Dexter walks into his home, he feels like something is amiss. He cannot exactly put a finger on it, but he knows something is shifting. He doesn't know if that's literal or metaphorical. Surely, he finds himself guilty of nearly losing Peter twice in a year, but that doesn't mean he is going to feel so much and all of a sudden. But when he settles on the bed, he feels so tired that he lies down immediately. His thoughts are obviously that of Peter. Interesting. And when Dexter finally falls asleep just like that, I have an inclination of what's going to happen next, for I see what is happening. Hello guys, the fifth and last part of the story is already up for the members. If you want early access to the next part of the story, consider joining our channel membership today. Stay tuned for the next part of the story coming up next Saturday. Who do you think is the next person whose life Peter is going to experience? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.